Okay, third time trying to record this. Let's get boys. So, a couple of weeks ago, the internet, or more specifically Twitter rather, they were having a hissy fit over Genshin Impact. I guess that's like what the Russian roulette of social discourse decided to land it on this week. Concerns about racism built into the game itself. Specifically about the Hilichurl enemies. I don't even know if that's how you even pronounce it. Hilichurls? Like, can I just call them Churlies? Like, no. We'll be nice about this. Basically, the point is that Hilichurls promote racism and colorism because they are explicitly modeled after native peoples and indigenous cultures because of how they're dressed and like their mocap using like tribal-like looking dances, or not mocap, animated rather. Because this whole thing was started when a documentary about Genshin Impact. Actually, why am I explaining all this? Like, the people watching this are probably from the Genshin Impact community itself, so they probably don't need to hear this for like the millionth time. I think what you do want to hear, though, is why do you care about what I have to say? Some rando on the internet. I just see a lot of opinions being thrown around on the internet. Like, we have one camp saying how, like, this is all being made by a bunch of, like, white 14-year-old girls, and assuming people who are actually from like these indigenous groups or people who are of people of color like don't care about any of this. But those same people are in fact making an assumption about us in that we don't have a stake and we don't care about any of this. And that is just not true, because there are some of us who do in fact have an opinion about all of this. And that's just what the biggest rub for me when it comes to like internet discourse about race and cultural appropriations. Like, nobody seems to ask like what the actual groups in question who have a stake in all this. No one ever asks them what they think about all this. They all just like throw assumptions about us. And I am part of one of these groups. I am in fact half black and half Mexican. More specifically, I'm 40% native Mexican. Like, I took an actual DNA test. Like, I'm not just some Karen saying like, I associate myself as Native American because my blood type says I have 0.001 Native American in me. Like, no, it's 40% on my dad's side, and like these people like that don't even like know what tribe they're from. Whereas I now know that I'm from the Chihuahuan group from northwestern Mexico. And I've been doing a lot of like research into like learning more about my heritage, and like it's super fascinating stuff. And on the other end, on my mother's side, the black side, I've also been doing a lot of research on Africa, and especially West Africa. And I've just been learning so many things about African history, African culture, and all of it is just like super fascinating stuff that they never teach you in school. Like Africa has like castles and swords and knights and this cool magic system, like all this like neat stuff that every other country has, but people assume Africa doesn't have. Because what do you know, they all think that Africa is just nothing but like half-naked men dressed in straws, like hopping on one leg going hoi 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 hoot 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 hoot. And well, you know, that has to do with what we're talking about today. So I like to think that I do in fact have a stake in all this. I'm not an expert per se, but I at least know what I'm talking about when addressing the race about race, about racism, cultural appropriation, like all these fancy terms that the internet likes to throw around these days. But I will say that just for like complete disclosure's sake, for honesty, because that's another thing that I'm not saying enough of, is just honesty and self-awareness. I am not a Genshin Impact player. I am not part of the community, simply because I'm still waiting out on the Switch release, which still hasn't happened yet. Look guys, you can't tell me that you expect me to play this grindy ass game when I have so little time in my day anymore. Like, if I'm gonna be playing this grindy game, I need to be doing it while I'm on the toilet, okay? And no, I can't do it while on mobile either, because I have like this big black void on my screen from when I dropped it, so just no. I do have a lot of blind spots, and I'm going to address those blind spots, and I'm going to ask you guys nicely for you to fill in those blind spots for me, because again, I haven't played the game. I don't know the full details about it, so there's only so much I can come in with. But I still want to pitch in my voice into this, because there is a discussion that needs to be had about all this. And as someone who isn't an active member in this community, I think as someone who's from the outside, I think I have like a impartial view I can bring into all this, because a lot of emotions are being loaded into this conversation from both sides. You have people who feel betrayed by the game, and you have people who are defending the game because both parties have an attachment to this game in some way. Whereas me, I have no stake in whether MiHoYo like succeeds or fails in the light of all this. So I feel I can provide a bit more clearer perspective on all of this. So let's just get straight to the point where I think y'all really came here for. You came here to see whether your personal opinions are being validated or not. I'm just going to answer like 3 major questions very simply, or 4 depending. Like, 1, are you a bad person or a racist for playing Genshin Impact? No, I do not think you are. Do I think MiHoYo is a racist or problematic company for not just the racism part, but all the other stuff that's in Genshin Impact that I'm not going to touch on today, because this is one subject's already a lot. So the answer is no, not intentionally at least. Am I going to try and am I going to say that you shouldn't play Genshin Impact for any reason? No. Look, I think the biggest takeaway we can learn from all of this is that you just can't cancel a video game the same way you can cancel a person, all right? It's just not going to happen. And even if it was, like, it's just not worth it, guys. Like, it's not practical, and you know, I get it. Like, the world is crappy enough as is. People need some kind of outlet. I'm part of the party that believes like people are free to do whatever they want as long as they're not hurting other people. And you know what? People are just playing a game. They're not directly hurting anyone by doing so. So I don't think anyone should have any place to say like, you can't play this game because of this and that. Like, no, that's not how it works, okay? Just know that this conversation I'm having with you, none of it has to do with, Kyo, can you stop playing with my feet? My cat keeps attacking my feet. None of this is to try and like ruin your fun. I'm not trying to pee on anyone's parade. I'm not trying to make you feel bad. I'm just here to have like a discussion, all right? I'm basically serving as an ambassador for people who do feel a certain way about this game and why they feel this way. And to be honest, like the issues about Genshin Impact, they're not solely rest with this game alone, okay? If every problematic element in this game was like resolved, like it's not going to like change the world overnight, right? It's not going to get rid of racist people. It's not going to get rid of pedophiles. It's not going to like change global warming, all right? Like, it's not, none of that's going to happen, all right? It's just a video game. I don't think all this energy is really necessary, but what is necessary is having a broader discussion about depictions in the type of media we consume and how it affects us on a very subconscious level. If you guess by now from the way I'm talking, like, my final question is, do I think Genshin Impact is still problematic and does it still need to be talked about? Yes. Yes, it does. And yes, it is. In order to properly discuss why Genshin Impact is potentially problematic and why it matters, I need to do so in a way by addressing the main defending points that are being made so far for the game. Number 1, Genshin Impact is not racist because where else are they supposed to get the inspiration from? I don't know about this point. I don't see how it holds water in any discussion, because look, the game openly invites itself to comparisons to Breath of the Wild, because it's no secret that this game pretty much copied itself whole cloth from that game, and I don't think that's a bad thing in and of itself. That's just how genres both are created and evolve. I don't think the fact that it's a Breath of the Wild clone is a problem in and of itself at all, but it does invite comparisons. And if you look at that game, you'll see that all the enemies do have an inspiration, and it's called making it up. All the enemies, especially the bokoblins, the most common enemy, and the equivalent to the Hilichurls in Genshin Impact, the bokoblins, like, they're just monsters. They're just pig-like monsters that wear nothing but an loincloth, and they just hop around in a way that's very nondescript of any type of like racial or ethnic group. They're just goofy little monsters. Like, guess what, guys? You can, like, in fact, make stuff up. Now, of course, things always have an inspirational source from somewhere. Bokoblins are clearly pig-like, so that's where that inspiration came from. But the point is, like, it doesn't have to be from other peoples and cultures. You could have made the Hilichurl enemies like plants, basically, like plant monsters, or bugs, like most video games tend to do. If it is going to come from real-life cultures or peoples, it has to be for a reason. Is it really that much effort to like do some basic research beyond looking up a couple GIFs online? Actually, what am I saying? Of course it's too much effort. Point number 2. Genshin Impact isn't racist because the Hilichurls aren't inherently evil. The lore makes it a very strict point to point out how like these aren't inherently evil peoples. Like they are being mind controlled by whatever like the antagonistic entity of the world is. So therefore, the game can't be racist. Okay, so this is where my ignorance about Genshin Impact as game is going to come full light. So this is where I need you guys to help fill in the gaps for me. So tell me this. When you approach Hilichurls, do they attack you on sight? Or is there a way for you to just like walk through their gatherings and they just don't do anything? They won't hurt you, they won't do anything. You can just go, both of you can go about your business peacefully. Is there a way to interact with Hilichurls in a way that doesn't involve combat? Is there a village of peaceful Hilichurls that aren't subjected to the mind control of some type, or they have a protection? Are there Hilichurl NPCs? Is there a Hilichurl... Is there a big-titted Hilichurl waifu that you can win in the gacha system as a playable character? That last part is just silly, but I am making a point here, and these are legit questions I have about the game, because from the outside looking in, it seems to me that Hilichurls only exist purely as enemies. They are always antagonistic to you. There's no other way to interact with them outside of violence, and they're just there for you to just XP your materials from. That's the only thing about the Hilichurls that I know. If that's the only way you can interact with them in the game, then I also think the point that, according to the lore, like, I think that's also completely null. Because players do not engage with lore. Like, I know I'm saying that, and there's a bunch of people who do engage with the lore, and I'm probably talking to them a lot of them right now, but like, to you guys, I'm not trying to discredit with how you enjoy the game, but you have to understand that a majority of players, especially casual players, which, you know, make up a majority of the audience of this game, they're not going to find that same enjoyment that you do. They just come in, log in, play the game for a little bit, turn it off, go back to like work, home, school, or whatever real thing they have going on, and go about their day. They're not going to be looking up Wikipedia articles all night, like learning about the lore. They're not going to like talk to every single NPC. That's just not how they engage with the game. You know, they actually play the game. They don't read the game. And this is important. And in order to explain why this is important, I need to go on a slight tangent and talk about Lindsay Ellis. Okay, so this is something I'm adding in while I'm editing the audio, because this was recorded before Lindsay Ellis got canceled. Put disclosure, we're not talking about her getting canceled. I'm actually part of the team that thinks she didn't do anything wrong and she didn't deserve the type of backlash that she got. But we are going to talk about that later. But for now, we're just going to talk about a video essay she made a while back. My rednecky neighbor is like cutting some trees down, so hopefully y'all can't hear that. So Lindsay Ellis released a video, was it last month I think, about tracing the pop culture roots of transphobia in media. During that video, she makes a pit stop at Silence of the Lambs. I don't know if y'all are familiar with Silence of the Lambs. I have no idea who my target audience is, because this is like my first video in like forever. Like, just Google search Silence of the Lambs, okay? Like, but the thing you have to know for this discussion that it's about serial killers. In the film, there are two particular serial killers that are the focus of the story. Hannibal Lecter and the antagonist, Buffalo Bill, who is a serial killer who is coded as someone who's a feminine man, possibly trans, and has like body dysmorphia issues and wishes to be a woman. Now, Silence of the Lambs, very well-known movie, very influential. The thing about that movie is the writers, both of the original book and the screenplay adaptation, they kind of knew they had like a big yikes on their hands, framing the main antagonist as like possibly trans, and that's not what they were aiming to do at all, because even they would know at the time that when the book was written that the trans group was already like super oppressed. So they added a bunch of lines in the movie that was there solely to explain that like just because he is trans, that is not what makes him dangerous. In fact, in the film they mention it a bunch of times, but the thing is, like, people don't remember individual lines. When they think of Buffalo Bill, and when Silence of the Lambs is brought up, they think of two things. They think of our two serial killers, Hannibal Lecter, and they think of Buffalo Bill. And when they think of Buffalo Bill, they think of a man, half naked, dancing around to like Goodbye Horses, dances around with a pet poodle he calls Precious, speaks with a lisp, and he's making a lady suit. Like, that's all the images that people think of when they think of Buffalo Bill. So even though the text of the film made a very explicit point to say how like his trans or feminine tendencies are not what make him dangerous, the actual cinematography, the actual framing, and the overarching story, all of this implies the exact opposite, because that's all what's directly shown. And the fact that when you ask people to conjure up an image of Buffalo Bill, that those things are what they come up with. And I bring all of this up because I think the exact same phenomenon happens in games. Because again, let's talk about how the Hilichurls are portrayed strictly in gameplay. Like, remove all the lore, remove all the fluff. Let's just purely think about how a player interacts with Hilichurls in the game itself. Okay, I'm wandering around the world. I need like XP and materials or whatever stuff I need in this game to like get my next waifu. I see Hilichurls. Okay, that's the source of XP. I'm gonna go ahead a bunch of times, maybe do some cool moves and watch like the pretty graphics play out. Sweet, the thing's dead. I got my XP or whatever I need to get my big titty waifu. Oh, but I need more, so I'm just going to find the next obstacle in my path and beat them up until I get what I need. That's it. That's all the interaction they get with Hilichurls. They don't exist as creatures. They don't exist as a unique race. They are functionally a piñata.
They exist as objects for us to exploit for our own personal gain.
Some of you are saying, like, I know y'all saying this right now. You're typing in the comments saying, like, well, yeah, it's a video game. Video games have to have enemies. Like, and you're not wrong, but there's a better way to do this, especially in an RPG that Genshin Impact is trying to, like, sell itself off to be. Look, I've been playing the old Paper Mario games a lot lately. One of the biggest things that stand out to me is it's surprisingly well done world building of the Mario universe. Because for those of you who don't know, like in the first Paper Mario game, one of the first things that happens is that Mario gets like his ass kicked in by Bowser. He almost dies, but he falls into a village of Goombas. Peaceful Goombas, in fact. And these Goombas, in fact, nurse him back to health. For those of you who are younger who are asking like why this is a big deal, you gotta understand, like this was 2000. Y'all are probably used to like seeing Goombas in like Mario Party and shit, but back then, Goombas only ever existed as enemies in all the games prior, except maybe Mario RPG, but even then it was mostly glossed over. Goombas only ever existed as obstacles. They were a thing for you to stomp on, or a thing for you to avoid. That's all they existed to be in these games. That was the only level of interaction you had with these creatures. But then comes along Paper Mario, and this game, in its first opening act, introduces peaceful Goombas. In fact, they introduce you to an entire family of Goombas. Like, you got to know this family of Goombas. These weren't just mindless enemies anymore. These were a family. These were actual characters. They were a fully developed race in the Mario world. You do eventually come across actual Goombas that are enemies, that are loyal to Bowser, but they actually make a distinction like, oh, those are Goombas, those are loyal to Bowser, you want to watch out for those. And they make that distinction that, wow, these little mushroom monsters, they have factions. They have different loyalties. That's pretty mind-blowing for a Mario game. And you know what's even more mind-blowing? One of the Goombas even joins you on your adventure, and he becomes one of the most valuable members in your party because he has an ability where he gets to tattle on each enemy you come against and exploits their weakness. And that's super helpful when trying to do strategies when you're in battle. But do you want to know what's even more mind-blowing than all of that? Every single Mario enemy that has existed up to this point gets that kind of development. Koopas, they get their own village. Even the obscure enemies like those, like the bomb-throwing mouse from Super Mario 2, they are in a unique race, and they have their own village. The Bob-Ombs also appear, and they're like an exploited class of workers. I am not making this up. All like the enemies, like the Cheep Cheeps, the Boos, the Lakitus, all of these characters and more become like playable members in your party. What Paper Mario has done is to taken these glorified obstacles and they flesh them out to become actual races and creatures in this world with their own unique cultures. And yes, they also exist as enemies as well, but this is how you flesh out a race, by making them multi-dimensional, by showing that there's more to them than just a piñata. Am I really saying that Paper Mario has better world building than a game that actually tries to sell this off as an epic RPG? Uh, uh, don't answer that. I'm saying all this to demonstrate how enemies don't have to be enemies. If there's a claim to be made that these are in fact a very developed race and that they don't exist as just to serve as piñatas, and that they do deserve our sympathy and our empathy, then the gameplay itself needs to back that up. Because as it stands from my viewpoint right now, the argument that the Hilichurls don't promote racism because they are in fact like more developed than what they seem on to be is completely false, because what you do with them the entire game completely contradicts that claim.
Okay, so after I recorded all that initial stuff, I decided to be a smart boy and do some actual research. I went to the Genshin Impact fan wiki page, adjust your own blind spots and everything, like fight your own ignorance and all that. So I decided to put my money where my mouth was and actually go to the fan page and directly see what the game has to say for itself. And I kid you not, this is the enemy description for the Hilichurls. I'm reading directly from the page itself. They look similar to humanity, but seem to have lost both their intellect and spirituality. Their presence on this continent has been recorded for over 1,000 years, and yet they neither have history nor civilization. What the fuck? And here's another one from the Hilichurl shooter variant. Hilichurls do not in truth possess the craftsmanship needed to build arrows or crossbows. As such, it is commonly believed that there is an organization that controls the Hilichurls from behind the scenes and furnishes them with the equipment and material supplies. So, okay, you know what? You're right. I was mistaken. I was incorrect. It turns out that the Hilichurls aren't inherently evil. They're just being manipulated by an ulterior force. Okay, but that doesn't solve the issue that these are still a racist depiction, because these are lifting directly from the classic tropes used to depict the native savage archetype, which is an archetype that's been used to dehumanize native populations all over the world by colonial powers, and still has a negative impact on those same people to this very day. You people want to pretend that we're just pulling this shit out of our ass, that we're just making a big deal out of nothing. But it's right there! It's right in the freaking game! Do you people even read your own lore? Is this really the hill you people are choosing to die on?
Look, what I'm basically saying is that we need a big titty Hilichurl waifu in the gacha system. And we've come to the last point, and this one just kind of disappoints me the most. Okay, so we've established that they don't have to be based off of indigenous cultures, and that the way they're portrayed in the game is kind of iffy, because the only way you can interact with them is through violence and through exploitation of a group that's already exploited and faces a lot of violence in real life. But argument number 3. None of that matters because games don't affect people that way. I'm paraphrasing obviously, but that's basically the sum of the argument being made. Is it doesn't matter because games don't turn people into racists overnight. And they're not wrong, but they're also not right either. Yes, it's true that something like this isn't going to turn someone into a racist overnight. That's just not how psychology works. But to make the argument that games don't affect us at all, even on a very subtle or subconscious level, I feel like that's just completely... Look, I get it. We don't want to think that video games can turn people to do bad things in the real world. And we want to believe that because we had to fight for decades to defend video games from people who claim that video games promote school shootings, which still happens today somehow. So I get why you don't want to think that games can affect people that way. The research has shown time and time again that no, video games do not inherently make people violent. But at the same time, to say that video games don't affect us at all, that runs completely counter to the other argument we tried to make for video games. We also had to fight against snobs from other artistic communities that games are art. We've had to argue with film cinephiles. We had to argue with actual book novelists and writers. We had to argue with painters. We had to like make our case that video games are also a form of art, that they are expressive, that they have an emotional impact on us. And that is absolutely true. Games do in fact leave an emotional impact on people if it's crafted well enough. But to say that video games don't affect us at all, that's basically invalidating all the people who felt sorrow in their hearts when Aerith died halfway through Final Fantasy VII. That invalidates people who had pop-offs when they've run against their rival in a fighting game. That invalidates like all the people. It invalidates the people who created an actual bond with a complete stranger as they traverse a sandy world together in Journey. It invalidates the people who turn on a video game just to like enjoy themselves and have some peace of mind after coming back from a stressful day of just living on this rock. Because games provide all those types of emotions and more. To say that video games don't affect us, that completely invalidates all of that. And to make an even more grander point, not just about video games, but about art and stories itself, art shapes the way we see the world. Stories affect our morality and how we approach problems in our real life. And if you still don't believe that, well, do you really want to make that same argument that a book can't change a person's life? Do you really want to make that argument to your local Jesus fan club? Do you really want to fight that battle? Because what is the Bible but a collection of short stories with a protagonist that follows an overarching story? That's why these stories like survived for 2,000 years. They're not just engaging to some people as stories, but it also like gives them a framework to approach all the troubles in their life. It gives them comfort. It gives them hope. That's why these religions have persisted for so long, because they continue to exist as stories that people tell to their children at night. I don't know if they still should be, because I don't. Yo, have you actually read a Bible? Like, this shit that happens in there is like fucking metal. Like, a man's forced to choose like his God over his own son. Like, Jesus gets fucking mutilated on a stick. Like, holy shit, why are people reading this to their kids and like still afraid how like school shootings are happening? Like, are you sure they're not the problem? However, it's not one size fits all. Like, art affects us in a grand way, but it also affects us in a very subtle way we may not be consciously aware of. Genshin Impact is a game that's not going to make you racist overnight. But what it is going to do is it's going to continue to affirm or reaffirm the views of people who already have racist viewpoints. The viewpoint that people who are coded like this, who are indigenous and have like indigenous cultures and values, they are inferior, they are savage, they are dangerous, and they serve no other purpose but to be exploited by us for our own personal gain. Again, as I said, this isn't a problem with Genshin Impact by itself. This is a problem with how indigenous cultures are portrayed in media in general. And yes, it's human nature for us to naturally want to like demonize the outgroup, but this specific trope of the hopping indigenous person that's dangerous, that is a specific product of colonialism, of racial powers that wanted to demonize another racial power so they can exploit them without any kind of moral repercussion. Did y'all know that the slave trade was problematic even back then in its early days? Like, when people realized like we were like cramming actual humans by the hundreds into boatloads, like literally cramming in like fucking pickles in a pickle jar, and that's not an exaggeration. Like, these poor people had to like shit and pee on each other for like months as they traveled the Atlantic Ocean. Like, there were people back then who was like, yo, this is really fucked up. But did you know what the slave traders had to do? They started pumping propaganda across Europe and America saying like, no, you don't have to feel bad about these people, because you know what? These people are savages. Look at all the stuff we found in Africa, all the stuff that they're doing. Oh, they're demon worshippers, they're satanic, they are cannibals, they do human sacrifices. Look at all this gross shit that they do. They don't deserve humanity. They don't deserve to be treated fairly. because they're just simple savages. They're animals, and we have no problem slaughtering animals, so why should you feel bad about them? This picture of the savage that has been painted from back then persists to this day, but not because we have an agenda to, well, some people, they do have an agenda, but it's mostly out of ignorance. Like, people don't make depictions of savagery of indigenous cultures because they want to intentionally dehumanize these people. They're just using it because, like, the trope has been around for so long that most people just understand it as a shorthand. When you need something that's identifiably dangerous yet also human in shape, then it was just so much easier to just paint an indigenous man hopping around doing some weird shit you do not recognize and say they're conjuring black magic. And because of cultural osmosis, people immediately get, oh, that's dangerous. These people are bad. We should feel worried for our protagonists. Or in games, like, we should feel bad for us. We're in bad juju territory. Culture relies on shorthands, which is why you can't really say every single problematic depiction is intentionally racist. It's problematic, yes, but it's racist, but it's not intentionally racist. It's accidentally racist. And yes, these things do matter because these attitudes do still affect people in real life today. Africa, parts of Mexico, South America, and South Asia, any hotspot that has like a large population of like people who come from explicitly indigenous background, they are some of the poorest countries and communities on the planet. And it's because of corrupted politicians and of soulless corporations displacing these people and taking over their land to mine for their resources for their own personal gain. They're the victims of an industry that doesn't care about the actual beliefs or the sufferings of real life people because they're savages. We don't have to think about how this is affecting them. It's not like we create those conditions for them. No, they brought this on themselves because they're savages. They don't know any better. They're stupid. They don't have a writing system. They don't have all the stuff that Western civilization has created, like toxic fumes and the fucking Snuggie. Like, they don't have that. They only exist so that we can exploit them for resources for our personal benefit. And you know what the kind of people who make those kind of decisions are? As much as we want to paint them as like horrible, eldritch beings that are beyond our comprehension, the far scarier truth is that the people making these decisions are also people. They're businessmen, they're businesswomen, they're people who also watch movies. They also watch TV when they just want to like come back from a long day of work, probably coming down from like the shitload of coke they've been snorting, and they just want to turn their brain off and watch some TV. And what do they see? They see an episode of a detective show where a voodoo man is causing a murder. And they think to themselves like, yep, that's definitely what voodoo is like. I'm glad I don't have to feel bad about exploiting West Africa. They don't consciously think that, but it affirms their preconceived like notions about savagery, you know? So this is why depictions of stuff like this matters in media, whether it be a video game, a movie, a novel, a TV show, a comic, like whatever. Like, indigenous groups have always been depicted like this, and it's just not true to reality at all. But people won't know that because they don't bother to look or ask, because they feel like they don't have to, because they think they know everything they do from the media they consume. And they don't have to question the implications that this may be having, because that's the biggest rub of all of this. The reason why there's such ardent defenders of Genshin Impact, the reason why there's so many people reacting the way they are to this particular controversy, is because they don't want to have to like analyze why these issues exist in the first place, because then that means they'll have to be asking very uncomfortable questions about themselves and the type of product that they support. Oh man, like, if Genshin Impact is problematic, that means it might be hurting people, and I'm playing with it, I'm giving this company money, I'm enjoying the stuff that's in this, but it's problematic, and it's hurting people. So does that mean I'm hurting people? Am I a bad person by enjoying this game? Oh no, I don't want to be a bad person. I can't be a bad person. And everyone in my life says I'm a good person. I bet if I ask them now, like they say, like, oh no, you're a good person. You never do anything wrong. So you know what? It can't be me. I can't be a bad person. So therefore, I can't be the problem. And if I enjoy this game's not the problem either. You know what the problem really is? It's these reactionaries on Twitter. These soy boy liberal simps who I can't. It's these idiots on Twitter trying to make a big case out of everything. They're making these ridiculous claims these claims don't actually mean anything. They're just making a big deal out of nothing. They're the idiots. They're the ones making fools out of themselves. They're the bad people. Come on, everyone. Let's make fun of the bad people and the idiotic takes that have no basis in reality. Ha ha ha. Look at these idiots. There, my ego is preserved. Now I can continue to mindlessly engage with my favorite content and not have to question anything about myself or the world I live in. Because this game is the only source of relaxation and relief I have from a world that's constantly chaotic and unyielding and unpredictable, and it's scary, and oh god, I don't want to go outside because all this news about shootings happening all the time. I don't even want to go to work, but I got to go to work because I got to fucking eat because I'm not getting paid enough. But that means I have to go to work tomorrow and I have to deal with my shitty manager and all these fucking co-workers who don't respect me. And no, stop thinking, okay? Just play the game. Don't think about anything. Just mindlessly consume content. Just consume. Get excited for the next thing that'll make you happy and fill the hole in your life. And then consume, don't think, get excited for product. Consume, don't think, get excited for next product. Is that where I'm getting at, basically? Like I could be off, you know? Like, I might be pulling stuff out of my ass, but this is what I'm guessing the mentality is coming from. I know I've said this several times by now, but I'm not here to pee on anyone's parade, okay? I'm not here to make you feel bad about playing Genshin Impact, okay? You are not a bad person for enjoying a game that may have problematic elements. Look, to be personal for a second, I do not believe in good and evil, because it's just not analogous at all to reality. Like, just take yourself as the prime example. You are so much more. You are an entire universe on yourself, filled with your own hopes and dreams and desires, your own regrets, your joys. You have people in your life that make you happy, that you make them happy, and you have people that you've also wronged, and people that have also done you wrong. You are so more complex that such a simple binary thing like good, bad, pure, evil, these concepts just cannot quantify who you are as a person. So that's why I say you are not a bad person. You're just a person, just trying to live their life just like the rest of us. Okay? So who am I? Who is anyone to get on your case about what makes you happy in life? I'm a person who thinks that anyone's free to do anything as long as it's not bringing harm to anyone else. And despite everything I said, Genshin Impact doesn't directly hurt people, but it is part of a far more complex machine that has far-reaching consequences that are beyond any of us. Genshin Impact seems like a fun game with a really fleshed out world that a lot of people seem to like enjoy spending their time in, and that's valid. But at the same time, it also exists purely as a money-making mechanism for Chinese investors and to line their pockets, and doesn't really have your best interests in mind. It's just more interested in how it can make more money. And the people who work at MiHoYo, they're not bad individuals themselves. Every single one of them is a complex universe on their own, and every single artistic decision, even that one guy, like tribal dancing as a reference for the animation that started this whole thing to begin with, you know what? He's probably not bad too, and I want to believe he doesn't have a racist agenda, because video game development is really hard. all these animators and artists are probably working on a really tight deadline, and they just had to crank out monster designs like really quickly. So they had to go with like the quickest shorthand they could come up with that's not blatantly a ripoff of Breath of the Wild, because it's already taking so many elements from that game. They have to take whatever advantage they can to separate themselves from the competition. So what's the first thing they thought up of? Tribal dancing, because again, cultural shorthand and all that. But it's also possible that he does have a racist agenda, because China is a very racist country, and that's a byproduct of like entire generations brainwashed by a dictator who doesn't know what they're doing, and how the attitudes of all those old people carry into like the new generation, how it's passed on. And I could go on for hours about all this stuff, but I have to pick up my girlfriend soon from her job, and you probably have better things to do with your life. Like, I'm sure you just came here to see if your opinion was going to be validated or not, and maybe I did for some, and for others I didn't. But if you're someone who I didn't validate their opinion, but they stuck by anyways, I thank you, man. Or woman, or whatever your preference is. I really do appreciate you spending time to like hear someone out on a subject like this, because it's not easy. I know, like, stuff like this is touchy for a reason, but it's a discussion that needs to be had. Because again, I'm not here to like tell you not to play Genshin Impact. I'm just here to raise awareness and explain why these things are worth talking about. We all share this rock with each other. The things we've been talking about are just a wider issue with racial depictions in media. And while I don't think people should be canceling shows and productions over stuff like this, we still need to be having this discussion in the first place, because it is affecting real people. And we need to be aware of this so we can stop making the same mistake that we've been making for hundreds of years and start treating each other with just a bit more humanity. Because you know what, like, whether you're Christian or Islamic or Buddhist or, I don't know, Scientologist, like, I don't know what kind of morality you guys have, but I'm assuming it's also on the same lines of like, don't be a dick to each other. Like, that's the one thing we can all agree to. Don't be a dick. So can we just start actually acting that out? Again, people on the Genshin Impact defenders, thank you for sticking around for this long. And for people who already had, like, who knew all this and just felt better about themselves because someone else agrees with them, I'm just going to say this, guys, like, you got to stop canceling this shit on Twitter, okay? Like, you got to take the approach that I'm doing. Like, you got to come from a place of like, hey man, just so you know, like, this is happening. Like, yes, you're going to have assholes who are still going to be like, you oversensitive baby, but you got to be just calm about it, all right? Because if you try to be the aggressor, if you try to like outright cancel a video game, like, it's just going to do nothing but make enemies. Like, it's going to get people like the reactionaries we have right now who aren't going to listen to you because they're feeling like they're attacked, because in a way they are attacked. So don't be aggressive with these callouts, okay? When it comes to like cultural appropriation and like racism and like all these other problematic elements, you have to stop canceling this shit, okay? You have to approach it with gentleness. Think about how we used to tame animals. Did you really think we were able to tame dogs and cats by like chasing them out into the field and like strangling them until they did what we wanted? Like, no. They became part of our community by being gentle with them, by like showing acts of kindness, like just giving them little scraps of food that we left over and just giving it to them and letting them approach us. You have to approach these things with compassion and love, not with anger and aggression. And it's hard. Believe me, I know. You've heard me like freak out a couple times just talking about all this, so I know it's hard, but you have to try, okay? Because that's the only way you're going to get people like the reactionaries to listen to you, okay? Same goes to like the other side, okay? Like, you're not going to be making friends. You're not going to be convincing anyone by advocating for like racism, okay? If someone says like your thing is racist, you at least have to hear them out, okay? Let them make their case. If they make their case in good and politely, then you should respect that. If they make their case poorly and are just being rude all the time, then yeah, you have a reason to like respond like a dick, okay? That's valid, okay? So look, can we all just agree to stop being dicks to each other and just have civil conversations? Yes? Okay? Good. Alright. I'm so thirsty.